What if I told you that the technology destroying your health and bankrupting your family is the very same innovation that convinced an entire civilization they no longer needed to understand food? The refrigerator promised us freedom, it delivered us dependence, and today, we're paying the price in ways our great-grandparents would have never tolerated. Before electricity rewired our relationship with preservation, people possessed something radically different: actual knowledge. Not hacks, not trending TikTok tips, not Instagram-worthy food storage. Real, generational, deeply embedded understanding of how food actually works. And here's what's shocking. They weren't storing food just to survive the winter. They were engineering nutritional density, discovering fermentation secrets that science is only now validating, and creating preservation systems so elegant that spoilage was almost impossible. But this isn't a video about nostalgia. This is about how we collectively abandoned a system that worked for thousands of years and replaced it with a system that requires constant energy, produces toxic chemical preservatives, and makes us entirely vulnerable. Think about what happens the moment the power fails. Most survival channels show you root cellar secrets and stop there. They'll tell you about temperature, humidity, vegetable layering, and apple storage techniques. But they're missing the revolutionary part. They're missing why this system actually works so profoundly that it should fundamentally change how we think about food security, nutrition, and independence right now, today, not when some hypothetical disaster strikes. Let's start with the most counterintuitive truth. The foods that survive longest in a root cellar are the ones that are alive. Not dead, not processed, not stripped of their natural defenses. Living vegetables, in dormancy, are actively resisting decay. That's not poetry. That's biology. When you harvest a carrot and place it in the right conditions, it doesn't immediately surrender to decomposition. It enters a state of suspended animation, still respiring, still defending itself against bacteria and fungal attack using its own biological systems. Your refrigerator doesn't do this. It stops respiration. It creates a dead zone. And in that dead zone, everything becomes vulnerable the moment power is interrupted. But a root cellar? It maintains life. It maintains the vegetable's internal defenses. That's why a properly stored apple could last not just weeks or months, but literally a full year. And when you bit into it, it would still taste vital, still carry nutritional integrity. Now here's where most people get it completely wrong. They think a root cellar is just about temperature control. It's cold, food lasts longer, simple. But that's surface-level thinking. The actual genius of traditional root cellars was layering, not just organizing. Think about what happens when you store vegetables with certain fruits. When you use straw instead of plastic. When you create subtle air gaps instead of vacuum sealing everything. You're not just preserving, you're creating a microclimate ecosystem. The ethylene gas that ripening apples naturally produce, farmers understood this. They used it strategically. Place apples near potatoes, and the ethylene would slow the potatoes sprouting, but separate them into different compartments with breathable barriers, and each section maintains its own atmospheric balance. That's not luck. That's engineered knowledge, so sophisticated that modern food scientists are still studying it. Let me break down something that will change how you think about food forever. The bacteria that causes food to spoil doesn't actually need time to destroy your nutrition. It needs three things: moisture, oxygen, and temperature stability, above about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove any one of these, and spoilage slows dramatically. Remove any two, and it nearly stops. Remove all three, and you've essentially paused decay. A root cellar doesn't need electricity to maintain these conditions, because it's built into the earth itself. The ground insulates. The walls breathe. The ventilation, usually a single small opening near the top and another near the bottom, allows just enough air circulation to prevent stagnant moisture from accumulating, without letting in warm air. It's passive. It's elegant. And it works so well that a food preservation system designed thousands of years ago is scientifically superior to many modern methods in terms of nutritional retention. Here's what should alarm you. Most people alive today have never experienced a truly fresh vegetable. They've never bitten into a carrot that spent a year in storage and still carried a crisp, living quality that grocery store produce simply cannot match. That's not because root cellars make magic happen. It's because the alternative, industrial transportation, chemical preservation, and controlled atmosphere storage, fundamentally changes the food at a cellular level. The root cellar doesn't kill the vegetable to preserve it. It preserves it by allowing it to remain in a state of dormant life. That distinction might sound subtle, but it's everything. Because when you eat food that's been kept alive rather than killed and chemically stabilized, your body recognizes it. Your gut health improves. Your nutrient absorption increases. Your immune system doesn't have to fight against preservatives that your ancestors never evolved to process. But this is where people really miss the point about root cellars. They weren't just storage systems for emergency situations. They were agricultural planning tools. Farmers didn't just store what they couldn't eat immediately. They stored strategically, understanding which vegetables would last longest, which would break down into different forms during storage, like how apples could ferment into cider, how some root vegetables would slowly convert their starches into sugars, becoming sweeter over time. That's not just preservation. That's transformation. That's a food system that understood nutrition not as a static snapshot, but as a living process that continues even after harvest. Your frozen food doesn't transform. It stagnates. It maintains a kind of biological dead zone where nutritional value simply depletes over time. Now I want to address something that root cellar enthusiasts rarely discuss openly: the sensory knowledge required to make this system work. You couldn't just throw vegetables into a hole in the ground and walk away. You had to understand visual signs, how to tell if a carrot was beginning to sprout just by looking, how to detect the early stages of fungal growth before it spread, how humidity felt different when it was too high, how to listen to the space, yes, literally listen, to understand air circulation. This was learned knowledge, hands-on, sensory knowledge that took years to master. It couldn't be downloaded or speed-read in a YouTube video. And when that knowledge became unnecessary, when refrigerators promised to handle all this automatically, we didn't just abandon a storage method. We abandoned an entire category of human competence. Think about what this means for your independence. If you can cook, you have a useful skill. If you can grow food, you have a valuable skill. But if you can preserve food without electricity, you have actual power. You have autonomy. You have the ability to secure nutrition for your family in a way that doesn't require any external infrastructure. And that's something our ancestors understood so deeply that they barely needed to think about it. Most root cellar videos will tell you about specific vegetables and storage time frames. Carrots last this long, onions last that long, apples last even longer. But here's the secret that changes the entire game. The longest-lasting vegetables aren't the ones that seem obvious. Onions, yes, but also turnips, parsnips, and an often forgotten vegetable called salsify, also known as oyster plant. These vegetables have incredibly thick skins, low moisture content, and biological defenses that make them nearly indestructible. But here's what's truly wild. Storage time isn't actually the most important metric. Nutritional density changes during storage. A carrot that's been properly stored for 3 months will have different nutritional composition than a freshly harvested carrot. The starches convert, the antioxidants concentrate, and certain vitamins actually increase. Your ancestors weren't just storing food. They were aging it, like wine. They were developing it. They understood that time plus the right conditions equals enhanced nutrition. I've got a detailed resource available in the description and pinned in the top comment that goes much deeper into the specifics of how different vegetables transform during storage, the exact time frames, humidity ranges, and temperature sweet spots. So if you want to start implementing this immediately, you can find all that information right there. Let's talk about the economics of this, because it's genuinely shocking. A single modern refrigerator costs between $8 and $3. It requires electricity, which costs roughly $1.05 to $30 per month depending on your region. Over a decade, that's a single appliance costing thousands of dollars just to operate. A root cellar built properly costs between $2 and $5 in labor and materials, once, then $0 forever. Zero electricity, zero ongoing costs, zero vulnerability to power failures. But the real financial advantage is something deeper. When you store food in a root cellar, the vegetables arrive at your table at peak nutritional density. Your family eats better. You get sick less frequently. You're not paying for the hidden costs of modern food preservation. The doctor visits, the medications, the reduced productivity from chronic inflammation caused by processed foods. Now let me address the elephant in the room. Most people reading this comment section will not build a root cellar. They'll watch this video, feel inspired for about 48 hours, and then their refrigerator will open, and they'll forget everything I just said. And that's okay, actually. But here's what's not okay: remaining unconscious about your dependence on a system that could fail at any moment. Even if you never build a root cellar, understanding how they work fundamentally changes how you evaluate food. You start asking different questions. You start noticing that truly fresh vegetables taste different. You start understanding that fresh from the supermarket actually means shipped, stored, and chemically treated. You develop skepticism toward the default system, And skepticism is the beginning of independence. There's also a psychological element that root cellars teach us. They force you to plan ahead. You can't just show up at a store and grab whatever looks good. You have to project forward. What will your family eat in January? What about March? This kind of thinking, seasonal thinking, is almost extinct in modern culture. And when you lose seasonal thinking, you lose touch with a fundamental rhythm that humans evolved within for hundreds of thousands of years. Your ancestors didn't just survive using root cellars, they thrived. They had stable nutrition year-round. They avoided the nutritional deficiency diseases that plagued populations in northern climates before food preservation techniques were perfected. They developed cultures and cuisines around seasonal availability and storage techniques. Root cellars didn't just keep food fresh. They shaped entire civilizations. Here's something that will blow your mind. Certain vegetables actually improve with age in root cellar storage. Turnips become sweeter. Cabbage becomes more complex in flavor. Pumpkins and squash develop deeper, more concentrated flavors. That's the opposite of everything we've been taught about freshness. We think peak freshness equals peak quality. But storage, when done correctly, actually develops quality. This is why restaurants with serious chefs often have root cellars or conditions similar to root cellars. It's not nostalgia. It's not aesthetic. It's because they understand that storage is not the enemy of flavor. It's a tool for developing it. The problem is that industrial food systems got the equation wrong. They optimized for quantity and shelf life rather than quality and nutrition. And we've all paid the price. Let me give you specific practical knowledge about the one aspect of root cellars that people always get wrong: humidity. Everyone focuses on keeping things dry, but root cellars aren't dry. They're humid. They're typically between 90 and 95% humidity. And if that sounds like a recipe for mold, you're thinking like a modern person. Mold requires both moisture and stagnation. Root cellars have moisture and constant, gentle air circulation. The combination prevents mold while maintaining the moisture that vegetables need to stay crisp and vital. Think about a carrot you've kept in a regular refrigerator for 2 weeks. It shrives. It loses that crisp quality. It becomes slightly rubbery. That's because refrigerators maintain about 40% humidity while also stopping the vegetable's respiration. It's the worst of both worlds. Root cellars maintain high humidity while allowing normal, slow respiration. The vegetable stays hydrated at the cellular level. Now, here's the most dangerous misconception about root cellars: that they require stone and earth and serious construction. Some root cellars are exactly that, dug into hillsides with proper ventilation and insulation. But others are simpler: a corner of an unheated basement, a well-insulated closet, an outdoor buried box with proper ventilation. The principle is what matters, not the construction complexity. The minimum requirements are 3: consistent temperature between 32 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, relative humidity between 85 and 95%, and gentle air circulation. Everything else is detail. You can achieve these with surprisingly modest resources. The problem is that it requires intentionality. It requires building something that doesn't produce dopamine hits or Instagram engagement. It just works quietly in the background, doing its job for months at a time without requiring your attention. Here's what people don't want to hear. The most valuable thing about root cellars isn't the food they preserve. It's what preserving food teaches you about reality. It teaches you that systems have physics, that infrastructure has limits, that independence requires knowledge and work, not consumption and convenience. It teaches you that you're capable of far more than you've been told. Let me break down exactly what a year of root cellar storage actually looks like, because it's not just vegetables sitting indefinitely. It's a progression. October and November, you're harvesting at peak nutrition. You're bringing food in constantly. The cellar is filling up. December through February, the cold months are your advantage. Food is stable. You're eating from storage almost exclusively. March and April, things are starting to decline. You're seeing some sprouting in potatoes and onions. You're eating what needs to be eaten first. May through September, the storage becomes supplemental. Your garden is producing again. The root cellar is refilling for the cycle. This cycle was the dominant experience of human life for thousands of years. It's not old-fashioned, it's sophisticated. It's a rhythm that our bodies, our psychology, and our nutritional needs are literally designed for. The fact that you can now eat strawberries in January isn't progress. It's a system that has disconnected you from fundamental patterns that your biology still expects. If you're serious about actually implementing this and want the complete technical breakdown on all the specific vegetables, their storage requirements, the perfect temperature ranges, troubleshooting common problems, and even how to build a basic root cellar with plans that work for different climates and budgets, that's all documented in the description and pinned in the comments. You'll find everything you need to take actual action, not just understand the concept. Let me tell you something that might sound extreme, but I'm going to say it anyway. Your relationship with food storage is directly connected to your psychological freedom. When you know you can feed yourself through the winter without industrial supply chains, something shifts in your mind. Anxiety decreases, confidence increases. You stop believing that you're helpless. You stop believing that you're completely dependent on systems you don't control. Root cellars are one of those rare tools that are simultaneously practical and philosophical. They work at multiple levels. At the most basic level, they keep vegetables fresh. At a deeper level, they teach you how biology works. At an even deeper level, they reconnect you to seasonal rhythm. And at the deepest level, they rebuild your sense of autonomy and capability. The truth that nobody tells you is this: you're probably already making instinctive choices toward independence without realizing it. Maybe you're interested in gardening. Maybe you've been thinking about moving closer to nature. Maybe you've been having thoughts about food security that seem random, but are actually your deeper self recognizing that something is off about the current system. Root cellars aren't the endpoint of that thinking. They're the proof of concept. They're the evidence that alternatives exist and that they work. So here's where we land. You don't need to move to a homestead. You don't need to abandon modern life. But you might benefit from understanding a system that worked for thousands of years, and that's still superior to many modern methods in specific, measurable ways. You might benefit from the knowledge itself. You might benefit from knowing that when industrial systems fail, you have options. Root cellars are forgotten not because they don't work. They're forgotten because they require understanding, effort, and a different relationship with time and planning. Our culture abandoned them precisely because they demand something we've become unwilling to give: attention to real systems instead of attention to screens. And now, as questions about food security and energy reliability become more pressing, we're realizing we might have thrown away something valuable. The best time to learn about food preservation is not when you suddenly need it. It's now, when you can experiment, when you can make mistakes and learn from them, when you can build knowledge slowly, through seasons, through actual experience. That's how your ancestors learned it. And that learning, once integrated into your hands and your understanding, never leaves you. Thank you for watching all the way through this. I know it's longer than a typical video, but these ideas deserve the space. If this resonated with you, please subscribe so you don't miss our next video exploring forgotten systems that are still secretly superior to modern alternatives. Hit the like button and activate the notification bell so you never miss an upload. I genuinely appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next one.